Hi, everyone. We are here with Jennifer Austin today, and we're going to be talking about something really fascinating around personal branding. Let's start with your background. How did you fall into personal branding and image consultancy?
Well, thanks again for having me here, Esha. I'm very privileged to be speaking about an important topic, which is around personal branding and image management. Okay, background. When I was in my teens, I got scouted by a famous Filipino designer, and as an Asian, we're normally not very tall, so I was pretty lucky to have that opportunity to be a model and work across Asian countries. And when I was in university, I studied sociology and psychology. Basically, it's the way people behave in their environment, which brings me back to the many years that I've been working as an image consultant. So incorporated all this experience and help people around their confidence, their influence, whether that's obviously personal and in obviously in their work. And one of the things that I talk to my clients about is personal brand. And as what Jeff Bezos said, personal brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. So it's really the impression that you leave with others. Interesting, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
And most of you have heard this adage, you only have one chance to make a good first impression, right? That phrase is absolutely true. So I'd probably say between 7 to 30 seconds. That's the first encounter. And based on that meeting, a person will make an impression of you. So everything that you do and say gets filtered through that first impression. Wow. So if you made a good one, you're quite lucky, but that's going to create trust and credibility, and that will carry on into the future of the relationship.
And what's the difference between a personal brand and image? And how do you differentiate between those two? So image management and personal brand, what's the difference?
Well, they're quite different, but they overlap. It really depends because your image is part of your personal brand, if that makes sense. So let's just say, for instance, if no one ever saw a thing written about you, that is your personal brand. And then if there's something about you, let's just say an interview, a blog post, or your LinkedIn profile, and they've dealt with you for a long term, but you said that you were reliable, and then that kind of like and then you are not really reliable, and that starts to change your image, if that makes sense. So really the first encounter of you is the personal brand, if that makes sense. And as I said, the start of the brand is the first time they meet you. So you want to make sure they're consistent. They're kind of linked, you can't separate them because the personal brand is influenced or made up of your image, and it's the first impression. If that makes sense. So it's a personal brand is your overall first impression.
Yeah.
And the image management is kind of like your visual presentation. It's a subset of personal brand.
Got it. And so, and this is becoming more and more important as we have a lot more of this virtual world, right? Like a lot of our activity and our personality characteristics, the things that we're engaging in, that's so much online. Like the last decade has just completely transformed the way that people interact with us, right? Because of all the social media platforms. So obviously this is an area that is quite important now. But what if someone's completely new to the area? And so where would they start off in developing their personal brand? Like, how do you sit down and go, okay, I want to develop a personal brand. Where do I start? Is it like a vision board or what is it? What's the journey?
That's interesting you said that. It's a good question. There's two elements of personal brand. I would say in my own definition, in terms of development, it's your first impression online and face-to-face. And unfortunately, sometimes with a brand, it can be accidental. So let's just say you have a post online. People will make impression of you, and that's your brand. So if you have something online, that's your personal brand. If you don't have anything online, that's your personal brand. And you need to be careful what you post and be careful with the attitude that you portray, because you're going to be branded as that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
yeah, of course.
As I said, it really depends, because your personal brand can be developed face-to-face meeting. That's your brand. If they haven't seen anything online, they haven't searched you, they haven't Googled you, but if they've Googled you and they saw something, that's again, the brand is already developed. But over time, you can change that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So if we think about what are the things, steps to develop a brand. So I think there's 4 steps that I take my clients through. The first one is, I'd say, you gotta have a think about your values, what's important to you, your personality. It's kind of like a self-reflection of who you are and what is unique about you.
Yeah.
So you have to have an understanding of what that is. And then the second one is defining your purpose. What are your goals and mission? Based on the work that you're doing. Okay. And then the third one is your online presence. So if you are wanting to develop that, you got to pick a specific platform, whether that's LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and that has to align with your target audience. The third one is your content and engagement. So what is in your content? That has to also align with your personal brand. Okay. And your content will probably the things that you write in your blog, or you're guesting, like what we have right now, or how-to videos. And then engagement is how do you respond to your audience in social media?
So Jennifer, to make this applicable to our listeners, let's just go to a really practical example. Is there any research or evidence to suggest that the way that we dress at work or show up at work, and if that's inconsistent, does that jeopardize our opportunities and our impressions for promotions or growth into leadership opportunities within the organization? Like, is there any research to suggest the success or the failures around growth?
Yeah, that's really interesting you said that, because I just really want to make it summarize it shortly, so your listeners would understand what this is. In terms of research, your first impression is really your personal brand, isn't it? So your first impression is personal brand, and then your reputation. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So you start off with, I would say, you start off with what's online. When people search you, what does it say? Okay. You look at your LinkedIn profile. How does your photo look like? Is it representing the image that you want to present to the world? Like, I've worked with clients where, let's just say, I have a person who's actually in finance, a director. So we work with this personal brand in terms of how is he communicating himself to the world. So his photo in LinkedIn was basically he was behind a bar, and then he was wearing a t-shirt. So we're thinking, okay, you are a finance director and your background is this. So in terms of perception, what is that communicating? You look like you're a bartender, right? So it's like, so we need to sit down and think about, okay, what your personal brand, is this what you do for work? But what is your personality like? Because we want to incorporate his personality, not just his job. So we had to pick certain colors that are a bit like darker. Maybe he was wearing, so we put him in a suit, probably a t-shirt. Probably the background is a bit more subtle, but not like a bar, something plain. So that can really communicate the image that he's communicating to the world. Does that make sense?
From a practical standpoint, does this, like, for someone like me, I think about myself and I love the variety. Like, I don't like being kind of pigeonholed in one sort of image or classification. So what about the individuals out there who do like a little bit of diversity in how they dress, and how does that then impact the image and impact the personal brand when we do like to be a bit, we experiment? What about, so the question is, like, people that love to experiment with how they look and dress, how do you incorporate that into your personal brand? Or is that also just a personal brand, the very fact that you're experimenting?
Absolutely. Just the fact that you're experimenting is actually part of your personal brand. So think of your personal brand as your personality. It's your personality, it's your expertise, it's your achievements, your passion, the activities that you do on the weekend. And then your image is a visual presentation. So the clothing that you wear they have to connect. So you come across authentic. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you can still play with the colors, with your dressing, because that's who you are. Because at the end of the day, we don't want you to be someone else that you're not. If that makes sense. But it also has to be appropriate in the setting. You have to be authentic, because if you're not authentic, that comes across. Does that make sense? So that's why the personal brand is an important step in developing your image, if that makes sense, because it's really finding out what's unique about you. So it's really your uniqueness. So your uniqueness are the things that you do, the work that you do, your experience, your interest, your passion, your personality.
As you're speaking, I'm also thinking like, this is not a set and forget. You really need to have a conscious effort in terms of even reinventing it and keep re-exploring or going back to exploring how you're changing your style or how you want to evolve your image, right? How you want to evolve your personal brand as well as you evolve yourself.
Absolutely. I think it's ongoing because, every year we might change a career. We might say, okay, you know what? For instance, like, let's just say I had a client who was a fitness instructor. Okay. So he was able to build a brand around that expertise and started looking at other interests like nutrition. So then that person can incorporate that other interest in their corporate brand, if that makes sense. Because at this day and age, as you know, everything is so fast. There's always something new, new platform for getting yourself out there. Or you talk about trends. There's so many trends. Like you look online to go shopping. There's so many options. We are in a generation now where it's decision fatigue. So evolving is important and adapting, because reviewing your logo, reviewing your website, understanding what your target audience wants and what feedback are they giving you. So you need to incorporate all those things for you to be able to grow and adapt.
Yeah. What is the cost to an individual who doesn't care about their personal brand, who doesn't invest in, image and personal brand work?
Well, if you don't care about your personal brand, the society will brand you. So you have to be in control of it, because if you're giving it to chance, people will brand you. Think about the social posts that people would put in their Facebook, for instance. Let's just say a social going out night on the weekend. They're going to be branded based on that post. Does that make sense? So, it's really thinking to yourself and being careful of, okay, if I post this, what will people think of me? What is their perception of me?
And also visuals around this is crucial, right? Because I think I heard you mention once when we were speaking that there's more emphasis on the tone than what we're saying, right? And the posture and the body language. So it's all encompassing around our physical, more than the content of what we're speaking.
Absolutely. So again, what you're talking now is your visual presentation, which is your image. So when you're meeting when you're meeting people for the first time, and you think about it, we're doing an interview right now. If I did this, how does that come across? I look bored. I don't look engaged. Or if I just said, today the weather is very gloomy. The sun's not out. How does my voice come across? Bored, uninteresting. So all of these things that we pick up when we meet people for the first time is crucial, and also preparing for that meeting, whether that's a job interview or you're selling a product or even going on a date. We want to make sure we are setting ourselves up for success. How we stand, your posture, our tonality. Based on this research, Albert Meher said that 55% is nonverbal cues. And what are those nonverbal cues? It's basically our appearance, how we dress, the clothing that we wear, the style, the color, our facial expression. How do we use our hands? How we stand? How we walk? And then your tone. How is my voice coming across? Is it boring, arrogant? Is it high pitch, low pitch? And do I talk too fast? Or do I talk too slow? And then content is also important. Absolutely. But it's how you say it and how you deliver that content.
So, what is your top advice for individuals for them to elevate their personal brand and image?
I'd probably say it starts with three things. So you want to audit three things in your life. The first thing is have an audit of yourself. Who you want to be, where you want to be, where do you want to be 5 years from now? So it's an audit for yourself. It's really understanding your values, your passion. That's the first one. The second one is your visual presentation. Visual presentation is your clothing, how you behave, your tonality. And then the third one is your online presence. What people say about you, what you write about yourself, how you comment in LinkedIn. It's also what is the image that you're trying to portray in Instagram. And then where this leads to is authenticity. Okay. So authenticity is the foundation of a strong and enduring personal brand.
And so, are there any resources or books that you recommend as we close off this conversation today?
Absolutely. In terms of like books around image, there is a woman from the US, Lauren Solomon, Image Matters. It's packed up with a lot of academic study and research and examples around image. Dory Clark, she's also from the US, Reinventing You. It's around personal brand. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you would know this guy because he's so popular, Gary Vaynerchuk. Mm-hmm. Crush It. That's another book. And even listening to podcasts. Seth Godin, he's a good one. Rory Vaden, he's another favorite of mine. He's a personal branding strategist in the US. And LinkedIn resources, blogs, TED Talks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jennifer. That's been a very useful conversation, and I hope that our listeners got some insights out of personal branding and image. It's actually a lot of fun work. So I think, just listening to you and the journey that someone would go through around self-reflection, values, just the whole experience of it, I think would be so much fun. And then elevating and uplifting your online presence as well as your physical presence, of course. So thank you again to our listeners as well. I hope that everyone got some value out of it today. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you so much. And also, I just want to add for your listeners that's probably thinking, what is she talking about? I'm not understanding. I'm not quite sure. I do give a complimentary consultation. So you can reach out to me and we can do a free call and I can take you through the process and give you some tips. Thank you so much.